The one sequence that probably went through the most back and forth is the duet when they're at the rooftop of Fuchan between Rumi and Jinu. Hi, my name is Gary Lee. I'm the head of cinematography on K-pop Demon Hunters, and we're going behind the scenes on Collider. The dance sequences, I have to give a lot of credit to the animation director, Josh Beveridge's team as well. Is when doing a sequence like that is so much of a chicken or the egg thing between camera and animation. Like you need someone to dance for you to photograph, but you need a camera to be there for the animators to be able to place character in there to start dancing. So it's a lot of back and forth between our departments. And the Saja Boy debut at Myeongdong was the very first dance sequence that we tackled that. And that sequence took a long time to make because, it was like, we'll do these blocky dance moves that is roughly representing something, and then we'll start shooting it. But then once animation goes in there, they do something quite different where they come up with different ideas. And then we have to go back to kind of refine that camera. In terms of cinematic, to shoot that, so much of it is leaning into, like K-pop is such a modern film. It's such a modern fable that we want to lean into, like even the TikTok or the social media. When they do dances, they have their heads locked to the camera, like all those tricks that we want to kind of honor and also be mindful of K-pop music video sensibility, something that's really dynamic. The whole performance, K-pop, you have the moments where you felt like a music video, the dance and the camera is so choreographed. And that moment you feel like you're watching a concert like Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga, and how you move that camera is very differently. And it's so nuanced. And whether the camera is going to be off stage shooting them with super long lens, or the camera is on stage with them, like Takedown is a good example of being on stage with them. And dividing that up for the emotional impact is essentially the North Star, again, to how we kind of think about this. The visual concept is there to serve the story. Story comes first. And when first able to see the very first rough version of K-pop kind of put up in this animation process as a rough screening, immediately felt that, oh my God, this is a film that really goes into multiple genre, tone, sensibilities. And for someone who is behind the camera, this is extremely exciting. And I think part of the North Star in thinking about participating in shaping this film is to make sure to honor all those moments, from your K-drama to the game show to the live event concerts. Whenever we shift from one to another, we want to feel authentic to you being in that moment, how that camera is placed, how that camera is operated, and still has a grounded feel of a tangible world. So I think in a nutshell, a lot of thinking about K-pop Demon Hunter is how do I honor all these different flavors of this film without screwing it up? Yeah. We went with a Alexa, that large format camera, and for the reason that it provides a really big, straight out of the box bokeh effects that gives you this really romantic look, which I feel like a lot of K-drama sensibility kind of leans into. Some of those Asian TV shows, they don't have a lot of money to do crazy setups. So they'll have a very small crew at some public location and just getting a permit for 3 hours. And they couldn't really have all the extras around. So they would use the bokeh to kind of soften everything out. So to have a camera that's able to both be very dynamic, be able to capture wide scope, but also to be able to have that really shallow depth of field seem ideal for the film like K-pop Demon Hunter. That is about getting a camera that has to hide the biggest range of places we can go, given the palettes that we're given on the film. So traditionally in what we do, coming from animation or live action, previous layout world, Autodesk Maya has been the dominant software for decades. And Unreal Engine is really started as a game engine. And what it excels is the fact that you can kind of load insanely big open world that people can run in. And just indirectly, you created this package that visually allow for massive density of either environment, and also the camera that is in Unreal Engine is accurately kind of replicating a real world camera in the way the physics is calculated, the distance between the camera and the subject. What does that mean? Even if you can just input different film back to it, and what does that bokeh look like? All of that becomes very accurate, in which other packages just have kind of fallen behind. And the downside of Unreal Engine, at least on the animation cinematic front, is the fact that it just doesn't have a lot of robust animation tools because it's really made for video games. It's for real-time interactive choices with the player. Both Sony ImageWorks and Sony Picture Animation had made a choice to, hey, we're gonna try to do things in Unreal Engine now, and we need like a guinea pig to test it out. And it felt like at the very first conversation, the idea of using Unreal Engine, I wasn't totally sure that we could pull it off, because sometimes you're making a film under a deadline, you're using a new software. And at first it was kind of shoving it down my throat of like, you have to adopt this. I actually go through like a huge Unreal Fellowship training myself to learn the software. But what felt like something that was like shoving down my throat very quickly became, we felt like we're the benefactor of this experiment. Because what happens is we're now shooting images in very, very rough form, very, very early stages that really kind of represented what a real photography looked like. So if I'm photographing you, traditionally, if you use a 35mm, photographing you, there's certain expectation of the fall off in the background, what that looks like. In animation, sometimes like the very first image when I capture you, like everything's sharp, you'll see all the junks in the background, and then people start having discussions on like, hey, can we move that trash can all the way in the background? But that like later on after lighting, like that trash can is gonna be out of focus. So the fact that we can do that very early on, then the conversation becomes more meaningful in the sense of looking at that shot for what it is. And on a visual level, it's very informative, it's meaningful. As a creative person, I think we're blessed to be able to use Unreal Engine for the project. I'm proud of the fact that because of that, some of those like really shallow depth of field really kind of carry through the pipeline, because animation process is so segmented. Sometimes like you have that intention, but it gets touched by 10 other people, and at the end of that process, they forgot that you're supposed to be that. In terms of speed in what we do, it hasn't really totally speed up the process, because it's like we're making film is an organic process. It goes through numerous iterations. So tool-wise, I think that iteration will continue to persist. Doesn't matter what kind of tool you use, but what the representation becomes very, very meaningful on the Unreal Engine. K-pop is already a global phenomenon as it is, even before K-pop Demon Hunters. So the idea that there is a global appetite for this, I think is there. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but the fact that how well it's getting received, I think it surprised everybody. And I do think that as we're making this film, everyone's really excited about making something that's so fresh and unique. When I first saw about this story, because I knew Maggie for almost 20 years, I remember seeing her at Sony's cafeteria, and I was like, hey, Maggie, what are you doing here? Because I was helping on this film Vivo at the time, and Maggie was like, I have a project here called K-pop Demon Hunters. And at the time I just go, okay, that's interesting, and she very roughly described this. And I think we all thought it's super fresh. And after you see the whole thing put up as a story, I'm like, oh my God, this is a gem. But the idea that it would just explode, I think that the world is just ready for it. I think she tapped into something that is very special. I applaud her for that instinct. The animation process, because it goes through such a long period and there's a lot of eyes on it, that there's always different ideas that comes through, or your notes from executive, or feedback from the audience, all of that. I have to say the film stayed pretty true to the initial intent. The one sequence that probably went through the most back and forth is the duet when they're at the rooftop of Bucheon between Rumi and Jinu. Just because when you're trying to manufacture not a on-stage camera, like a performance sensibility, you're like an actual music video, something that is telling a story through a music video. Where shot and shot, there's no continuity. You don't care about continuity. Suddenly the environment doesn't quite work with that kind of approach. So we have our layout artist, Alfredo, had to kind of break up the sets into multiple pieces and have them just work for that one shot. And it's almost like when Rumi walks over passing the camera, if you just turn the camera around, there's nothing there, because it's just very much built for that one shot. So I think that particular sequence was one we go, oh yeah, that's a cool music video we want to shoot. But when we sit down and try to execute it, then it becomes like, okay, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. How do we, now it's about cheating. We just continue to cheat, like elevation cheats, street alley cheats, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so that's the one that really stood out for me.
That's awesome. Gary, thank you so much for your time. This is such a pleasure meeting you and talking about all the technical stuff about the cinematography of Demon Hunters. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I'm honored. Thanks for having me, Michael.